Today, we're going to replace the GT56 transducer on the Kraken Trolling Motor. For this process, we will need a number 2 Phillips screwdriver, 2.5, 3, 4, 5, and 6 mm hex bit or driver, medium strength thread locking compound such as Loctite 243, canned compressed air or an air compressor, diagonal pliers, zip ties, trolling motor replacement kit for the Kraken, electrical tape, a torque wrench, and the replacement GT56 transducer for your appropriate sized trolling motor shaft. Before replacing the transducer, you must disconnect the motor from power. Open the shaft cap and disconnect the cables to remove the shaft cap, and remove the propeller drive motor from the shaft. First, disconnect the trolling motor from the power source. Remove the trolling motor from the boat and lay it flat on the table. This will help make the transducer replacement easier and prevent damage to the trolling motor propeller drive. Then remove the 4 screws securing the shaft cap to the propeller drive motor using a number 2 Phillips screwdriver. Carefully lift the lid of the shaft cap to access the cable connectors inside. Unscrew and disconnect the USB connector. Ensure the O-ring remains in place. Release the latch and pull the connectors apart to disconnect the data cable. Unscrew and disconnect the transducer cable. Then remove the split connector. Remove the split connector and the rubber O-rings. Carefully cut off the 2 zip ties holding the power cables. Slide down the protective coverings on the power cables. Remove the 4 set screws on the 2 power cables using a 2.5 mm Allen wrench. Disconnect the power cables. Next, remove the protective coverings from the power cables. Now we will remove the propeller drive from the shaft. Remove the 6 screws that secure the shaft base to the propeller drive motor using a 5 mm hex bit or wrench. You should dispose of these 6 screws. New screws, washers, and O-rings are provided in the transducer replacement kit. Remove the recessed nut securing the transducer cable to the shaft using the trolling motor tool provided in the kit. Straighten the cables at the top of the shaft. Gently pull the propeller drive motor away from the shaft base until you can see the power and data cables connected to the propeller drive motor. Push the transducer cable grommet out from the downshaft adapter. Gently pull the cables through the shaft. Ensure the connectors do not get caught on the top of the shaft. The power and transducer cables should pull through the shaft completely. Now remove the skeg. Remove the 4 screws securing the skeg to the propeller drive using a 4 mm hex bit or wrench. Using a 3 mm hex bit or wrench, remove the screw holding the bottom of the nose cone. Use a 4 mm hex bit driver to remove the 2 screws on the front of the nose cone. Remove the nose cone. Then remove the 4 screws and 4 bushings securing the transducer to the nose cone with a 3 mm hex bit or driver. Dispose of these 4 screws. New screws, washers, and bushings are provided in the transducer replacement kit. Next, remove the transducer. Now remove the blue and black motor gaskets. Apply grease from the grease packet to the new blue and black motor gaskets. Place them in the same location as the old gaskets. Let's install the replacement transducer onto the trolling motor. Place the neoprene pad sticky side down on the replacement transducer. Now reassemble the nose cone with the new transducer. Reinsert the 4 bushings. Insert and tighten the 4 screws and washers to secure the replacement transducer to the nose cone using the 3mm hex bit or driver. Route the transducer cable through the nose cone so it fits correctly on the propeller drive motor. Place the nose cone onto the propeller drive motor. Insert and tighten the 3mm screw with the 3mm hex bit or wrench to secure the bottom of the nose cone to the propeller drive motor. Then insert and tighten the 2 existing screws with the 4mm hex bit or wrench to secure the front of the nose cone to the propeller drive motor. Insert and tighten the 4 existing screws with the 4mm hex bit or wrench to secure the skeg to the propeller drive motor. Grease the 25mm O-ring and place it on the recessed nut from the transducer replacement kit. Then place the cable grommet nut over the transducer cable with the threaded side facing the transducer connector. Feed the transducer cable into the front of the downshaft adapter. Apply grease to the rubber grommet. Place the rubber grommet on the transducer cable. Tighten the grommet nut using the grommet nut wrench. Now you will need to feed the cables back through the shaft. We recommend 2 people for this step. Feed the transducer cable into the shaft through the front hole of the downshaft adapter. Then wrap the power and data cables together using electrical tape. This will make it easier to feed the cables through the shaft. Have another person gently pull the cables from the top of the shaft. Blow out any dirt or debris in the 6 threaded holes on the top of the propeller drive motor using canned compressed air or an air compressor. Prepare the 6 bolts from the kit by placing a washer and a 4 3/4mm O-ring on each one. These bolts are different lengths. Make sure the bolts are in the position shown before tightening. The bolt length corresponds to the downshaft adapter height. Apply grease to the O-ring on each bolt. Avoid getting grease on the bolt threads. Next, apply a medium-strength thread locking compound, such as Loctite 243, to the threads in the 6 threaded holes on the top of the propeller drive motor. Realign the propeller drive motor with the downshaft adapter. Thread all 6 of the prepared bolts using a 5mm hex bit or wrench halfway through to ensure the shaft base and the propeller drive motor are properly aligned. Tighten all 6 bolts to 35 inch-pounds with the torque wrench. Now it's time to complete the trolling motor service. Place the protective coverings on the power cables. Reconnect the power cables using a 2.5mm hex bit or wrench. slide the protective coverings back over the power cables. Next, secure the power cables to the shaft cap using zip ties. Apply the zip ties at the location you remove the power wires. Then reconnect the transducer cable. Ensure to apply the split connector on the transducer cable. Tighten the collar. Align both sections of the data cable connector and press together to connect them. Reconnect the USB cable and tighten the collar. Then place the lid on the shaft cap. Insert and tighten the 4 screws to secure the lid of the shaft cap using the number 2 Phillips head screwdriver. And that's it. Thanks for watching. For more help, please visit marinesupport.garmin.com.